Howdy, this is Melissa talking about some of the student equity data and statistics available at College of the Desert. In a different video, I go over how to find some of that data. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about how to interpret it, what it says and what it doesn't say. Let's start. So, first up, when we focus on understanding what it is, we really have two goals here. One is to, state what we can and cannot infer from these statistics, and in order to understand why we can and cannot infer certain information, we'll talk about where the data comes from. The second is to empower you to find and interpret statistics that are meaningful for your purposes. First up, you'll notice that the data we are focusing on and the culturally responsive curriculum review that I'm recording this for, of course you can use this for other purposes, but you'll notice that a lot of our data focuses on disproportionate impact. So let's start by clarifying what that means. So first off, we say that a group of students experiences a disproportionate impact if an outcome statistic is sufficiently lower for that group than the rest of the total student population, meaning the population of students that are not in that group. Note that in this definition, we assume that the outcomes are desirable. So that's why we say a sufficiently lower outcome statistic. If for some reason now in this case we won't be looking at any, but let's say you were in a situation where the desirable statistics are lower. For example, if you had like a fail rate or something like that, then instead of disproportionate impact would be if the outcome statistic is sufficiently higher for that group. Secondly, you may have noticed in that definition, I use the phrase sufficiently lower, and in the alternate version, sufficiently higher. The key thing is, what does sufficiently mean? And you can take that to mean that it's different enough from what we expect that it's unlikely to be from just pure chance. Finally, disproportionate impact statistics don't reflect overall outcomes. So let's say you have that the outcome statistic is pretty much the same for all the groups of students. Then there's no disproportionate impact. But notice I just said they're the same. I didn't say they're all good, right? So, for example, if, let's say, the retention rate for every group of students was around 10%, then there's no disproportionate impact because everybody's dropping out at the same rates, right? Now, that's not a good thing, but at least it's not, oh, well, this one group is doing significantly worse than everyone else. So the next thing to consider is how are students grouped at College of the Desert with these statistics. They're grouped by gender. Pretty much only male and female are included, and we'll talk more about why students that do not identify as any gender, or let's say identify as non-binary or something else, why they wouldn't be included as a student group. They're also grouped by ethnicity and or race. So the categories COD has are African American, Asian, Hispanic, Native American, Pacific Islander, white, and other/unreported. Age range is another way students are grouped. So the categories are 19 or younger, 20 to 24, 25 to 29, 30 to 34, 35 to 39, 40 to 49, and 50 and older. Note that those are not equally sized groups. The rest of them are according to whether or not a student is in a special population. So the special populations are veterans, LGBT students, disabled students, low socioeconomic status students, and foster youth students. Note that some of these populations are fixed and others are going to change. For example, age range. A student's age is going to change as they go to school. And so let's say that they enroll at 19 and then turn 20. Well, that's going to change where which group they're in. Whereas veteran status, well, once a student is a veteran, they're still a veteran later, right? So just keep that in mind, that some of these are fixed, others are not. Next up, I want to point out that I've written in here LGBT identity, but if you look at some of the information on the COD website, you'll see sometimes LGBTQIA+. I don't like using that for this purpose because this comes from people self-identifying on the California Community College application as homosexual, bisexual, and or transgender. So it doesn't include people who identify as queer but don't identify as one of those groups, or questioning. Some people use Q for queer, others for questioning. Again, questioning isn't included in the selection. I typically stands for intersex. Again, that's not asked in the question on the CCC application. A for asexual, usually. Again, not asked about. And plus is whole sorts of other things. So since we don't actually have data on anything but the L, the G, the B, and the T, I only like to include that in my reporting of this data and the related statistics. For socioeconomic status, it really just states whether or not students are noted as low socioeconomic status or not. It doesn't go into any more detail than that. And everything else is just either, basically, are they or aren't they? There is one more group that you'll see in the data, and it's related to whether or not the students took classes from a teacher that participated in ACUE training, where ACUE stands for Association of College and University Educators. Let's say a student took a class from teacher A and teacher B, and teacher A was ACUE trained and teacher B was not. Well, then the student will be counted as being in an ACUE trained teacher's class for teacher A and not for teacher B. And so you have the same student in two different groups. So I don't really like to talk about that when we're focusing on students and student groups in particular. I'm not saying that data and the related statistics aren't useful, but I'm not going to focus on it. Next up, where's the data coming from? So some of it comes from the college, from College of the Desert. So for example, if a student is identified as a DSPS student, then that means they've registered with College of the Desert's Disabled Students Program and Services Office, and they've been approved as officially disabled. So note that this isn't a student group of disabled students. The student group is DSPS students, right? You can have a student who has a disability but is not part of DSPS. So keep that in mind, that since the data is coming from the DSPS office, the population is slightly different than what you might think it is. Other data comes from the CCC application, which I mentioned earlier about the LGBT students. Note that some of the questions are optional. So for example, the sexual and gender identity questions are optional. So that's another thing to consider when looking at the statistics from that data. Financial aid awards are used for some of the data. So a student in the low socioeconomic status group is a student who has ever received a California College Promise Grant, a Board of Governors fee waiver, a Cal Grant C Award, a federal Pell Grant, a Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, or a federal work-study job. And then finally, just keep in mind that some of the information is from a self-identification, and that self-identification tends to occur at one time and is never updated, and therefore that means that even if a student has actually changed their identification, it might not reflect it in the data. So which statistics are we looking at? First, I want to emphasize what we can't do. So we don't have any statistics from groups with fewer than 10 students. And the reason for this, well, there's actually two reasons. One is that it's a privacy concern. The other concern is that the smaller the group is, the larger the margin of error. And so when it gets too small, you end up with data that's pretty much totally unusable. Other statistics we don't have are anything about things that involve preparedness. So let's say that I was looking at statistics for Math 5, which is trigonometry. Well, the prerequisite for that is Math 49, which is intermediate algebra. However, we aren't allowed to actually check for that prerequisite satisfaction. All students are allowed to go straight into that Math 5 if they want. So that means you're going to have a mixture of students in that class who have satisfied the prerequisite and others who have not. And we don't have that information. So that does cause there to be a lot more variability in certain statistics. There's also, other ways you can check for preparedness, things like, are they retaking the class? Did they do well in the previous class? So let's say they did satisfy a prerequisite, but they only passed with a C as opposed to an A. We don't have that information to look at least not in the dashboards we're looking at for this purpose. Okay, now let's talk about the yes, what statistics are available in this disproportionate impact dashboard. And there's really three bits of information. There's the success rates, retention rates, and enrollments. Think of success rates as you take the number of grades that were given. So A, B, C, P for pass, IA, IB, IC, IPP, those are incompletes with, with the alternate. So the number of grades given that are passing. Okay, take that number and then divide it by the number of enrollments. For retention rates, now you basically have the number of grades given where you don't include a few special situations. So you don't include W's. Okay, you do include FW, you don't include W, things like that. That's where you take that number and then divide it by the number of enrollments. Okay, so that's it for just kind of understanding general information about the statistics. For how to actually look up your statistics, that's discussed in a different video. And for an actual breakdown of some of the statistics for College of the Desert, that is available on the Canvas page for the Culturally Responsive Curriculum Review workshop. Thank you for watching/listening, and I hope you have a lovely day.